Good morning, everyone. My name is Matilda Anokye, and I'm here today with my colleague, Sarah Schenkein, and we are Ladies of Landsat, and we are here today to talk to you about what Ladies of Landsat stand for and what we do. I'm pretty sure that if you're on Twitter, on LinkedIn, you might have seen a post from Ladies of Landsat. And so, yeah, today we are here to talk about Ladies of Landsat, and our theme will be community over competition.
Hello, my name is Sarah Schenkein, and I am a new team member of Ladies of Landsat. In my day job, I am a student contractor for USGS, and I do research about diversity, equity, and inclusion in Earth observations. I first got involved with Ladies of Landsat a little over a year ago with helping with creating these trading cards, which were displayed at the Landsat 9 launch. A lot of people were going up and taking pictures of trading cards of people that they wanted to connect with and maybe collaborate. And so that was a really nice way of kind of showing off some of the Ladies of Landsat.
Awesome. So my name is Matilda Anokye, as I said before, and I am a graduate student at Saudi University. I am studying urban forestry, and my research focus has been in the impacts of climate change on land cover and ecosystem restoration. My first interaction with Lady of Landsat was with Dr. Morgan Crawley at Google's Geo for Good in October, just a few months ago. And I have always been a fan of Ladies of Landsat, and I spoke with her, and then I am now a new team member of Ladies of Landsat, and I help with the publication of the Monday manuscripts, which we post on our various social media platforms, on Twitter and on LinkedIn. So we're going to speak more about what we do and what we stand for. Yeah, so as we see here, we have the Ladies of Landsat organizing team, and that is Dr. Morgan Crawley and Dr. Kate Fickers in the first picture on the left. Yeah, so Dr. Kate Fickers sitting right here is our leader, and she coordinated with Dr. Morgan Crawley in 2018 to start Ladies of Landsat. And then we have Dr. Flavia Mendes from Planet, Dr. Chris Job from USGS, Dr. Megan Halabisky from Digital Africa, Cheryl Rose Reyes from the Philippines, and then we have my fellow colleague here, Sarah Schenkein, and myself, Matilda Anokye. Yeah, so who is a Lady of Landsat? Most of the times we get a question, how do I become a Lady of Landsat? And I remember this is a question I asked Morgan when I met her. I asked her, so how do I become a Ladies of Landsat? And then she said, Matilda, if you are already a Lady of Landsat, since you want to be a Lady of Landsat, you're already a Lady of Landsat. So yes, Ladies of Landsat welcome scientists and allies of all backgrounds, genders, sexual orientation, ethnicities, social statuses, geographic locations, and all abilities. And we also consider ourselves to be sensor agnostic. This means that even if you don't use Landsat, the Landsat sensor, if you use Sentinel, any other sensor at all, you can be a Lady of Landsat. We are inclusive. Yeah, so our mission statement is that we aim to make the field of Earth observation more equitable, inclusive, and accessible for underrepresented scientists. Yeah, so I'm going to hand over to my fellow colleague here as she speaks more on the actions we've taken so far in amplification.
So the way that Ladies of Landsat kind of pursues our mission is through bottom-up amplification and representation of female and other underrepresented voices in Earth observations. We also call for action and awareness from the top down, asking those with power to change the landscape for all of us. And so we've had several kind of community get-togethers of Ladies of Landsat, which have been really wonderful and fun. We've gotten together at all of these different locations. Recently, I was at the Cora 22, and Matilda mentioned being at Geo for Good. And so this is just a really great way to show people who otherwise might feel that they're kind of isolated that no, you have a community and that we can get together and celebrate each other's work. So that's been really nice. We also are not alone. So Ladies of Landsat is on Twitter, and actually these numbers I think are, yeah, I think they might be a little behind. So we actually have even more of a following now. But we also collaborate with Sisters of SAR, Women of Waveforms, which is actually archived now, Dames of Drones. There are so many of these different organizations and initiatives that are supporting women, and there are more as well for other underrepresented identities. So we really love to be in community, not in competition with these other groups, because there's so much more that we can do together. So I'll hand it off.
Okay, so another amplification and representation initiative that we have taken so far is the Manuscript Monday. So most of the times there are a lot of people that raise issues concerning the fact that there are a handful of women in remote sensing. And so Dr. Morgan Crowley started the weekly series on Monday mornings, known as the Manuscript Monday, where we publish research articles from women in the Earth observation field. So yeah, we highlight cutting-edge research of women in the field of remote sensing from all over the world. And with this, we aim to reduce the proving citation gap between genders, and self-nominations are encouraged. And yeah, so as we see here, we have a lot of highlights so far. And next, I'm going to talk about the GitHub manuscript repository. So we have a GitHub repository where we have all of these manuscripts listed, and you can go there to find any research that you want that you think is in line with your research, and you can cite this research from a woman, so that you can, reduce the gap that we have in citing women in the Earth observation field.
Ladies of Landsat has also collaborated with the USGS, with some of the social scientists, on these case studies, which have been a really beautiful way to show Ladies of Landsat in a more narrative story format. So this has widened the view of what an Earth observation user looks like in that more visual format, and it's really beautifully illustrated by hardwood visuals.
Okay, so another amplification and representation initiative was the podcast that was already being done by Alistair and Andrew, and this was handed over to Ladies of Landsat and the Sisters of SAR. And recently we have updated this podcast with 2 episodes where we highlight women in the Earth observation field as well, and we talk about the challenges, their progress so far in the Earth observation field. And so if you want to listen to a podcast, you can just go on to any of the either Spotify, anywhere that you can listen to a podcast, and you can find Seen From Above, the Seen From Above podcast over there.
Okay, so in Earth observations, it's been commonly represented as kind of a leaky pipeline where the underrepresented scientists are kind of falling through the cracks. And so we have some mythbusters about this. First of all, starting with the metaphor of the leaky pipeline to begin with. So Dr. Berhe has, and also her colleagues have described this more like a hostile obstacle course. And this gets into how, this isn't a mistake. It's not like there are just like cracks by accident and some random people are falling out. No, specific people are falling out, but they're being pushed out by these obstacles that are set in their way. And so you can see how people with different identities have much different experiences, and that is the reason why there are these discrepancies. So the first myth that we want to bust is that there just aren't that many women in remote sensing and Earth observation.
So So the first basta was that there are not as many women in the Earth observation field. And the basta that Ladies of Landsat has is that we have the Ladies of Landsat Manuscript Monday. So if you're looking for any article, if you're looking for any research that has been done by a woman, you can just go to our GitHub repository, as I mentioned earlier, and you can find all of these publications, all of these highlights that we have mentioned earlier, and you can cite these women in your research. So the myth that there are not enough women in the Earth observation field has been busted here. We have a Ladies of Landsat Manuscript Monday GitHub accounts that you can log in and you can find all of these women and you can cite their research in your research work as well.
Members of Ladies of Landsat, as well as some of our colleagues from other organizations, have actually recently published research on the power imbalance in Earth observations. This specifically focuses on editorial boards and reviewers of remote sensing journals. And so we can see on the left that women are very underrepresented in these, gatekeeping positions to research being published. But also on the right-hand side, you see the very much inflated representation of the United States, China, Italy, Germany, some of these countries, and then that, like you can barely see South America and Africa on this map because they're so underrepresented. And so this is a problem of who is involved in deciding what research gets published. And so visibility and opportunity are critical aspects to representation. The next myth is that we just need to hire more women. All of our problems will be solved. We just got to hire people. But no, because there's so much more going on than just the hiring process. It's not only recruitment, but retention that's really important because there's, if this is a hostile environment to work in, then people are not going to be as willing to stay in, a hostile work environment. And yeah, you can kind of learn more on this topic tomorrow afternoon as I'll be presenting on this particular research study. But it's just really important to recognize that there's so much going on other than just the hiring process. And so retention is actually a harder and more important problem than recruitment. I'll also mention there's ongoing research about community support and the role of supportive systems in helping retain people in this field. Because when people have a community that supports them, they're more able to thrive. And, this is a really important sort of counter to the hostile environment that some people work in. Okay, and so our last myth that we want to bust is that when people say we are gender blind and color blind and we only hire the best candidates. And this is, this is a nice idea, but it doesn't really work in reality. So Project Implicit, in collaboration with Harvard University, has done some really great work on studying implicit bias that all of us have. You can't live your life in the world that we live in and not kind of get some bias just kind of ingrained into you. Even I actually took the test on Project Implicit to learn about my own biases, and I was surprised, the bias that I even have that's not really conscious. So we see this in hiring, which was also mentioned earlier, but so this is kind of the first step into things that this study shows how people with African American sounding names are called back for interviews 50% times less than people with white Anglo sounding names. And this is when the resumes are exactly identical. The research, they just changed the name at the top. They have the identical resume, and this is what they found. And so if this is happening, there's clearly a problem. People who think that they're colorblind are not in reality. Okay. So yeah, kind of the last kind of point on this topic is that, you know, we want to create actual mechanisms and actions to confront our biases, like was described, like if you block the names and don't look at them when you're looking at a resume and you only look at the experience. But also we want to recognize that when people say that they're colorblind or that they're gender blind, they're discounting the experiences that people have had that are really valuable. You know, that lived experience is something that should also be considered. Did you want to mention more on that? Okay. So, yeah, as we've been talking about, these processes may be unintentionally biased towards one group, and the differences between people should really be acknowledged.
Okay, so thank you so much for coming and listening to our talk today. And yes, so I'm pretty sure you've heard or you've learned something about Ladies of Landsat today. So if you want to help Ladies of Landsat organize events, if you have questions on how to be an active ally, so don't hesitate to reach out to us. We're on Twitter, and that is our Twitter handle, Ladies of Landsat, and our email is ladiesoflandsat@gmail.com. And talking about that, today we have a happy hour social at the VU Rooftop Bar. That is the address for that. And this event is hosted by Ladies of Landsat and sponsored by Geoawesomeness. And we'd love to see you all there. And yeah, whatever sensor that you use, you're welcome to be at this event. So thank you so much for coming and listening to us.